So I'm back with something a little bit different for you today. So I'm taking part in the 100-day project. So what I've been doing is recording what I've been creating every day. So the idea behind it is that I'm adding layers to my gel plate each day to try out some new techniques, some new products, lots of different ideas, and just having a good old play. So I've been recording each day and I've put this video together for you just to show you what I've been up to and sharing some of the lessons that I've learned really. So I've been using lots of techniques in terms of trying different ways of transferring line work to my gel plate. I've been using collage directly on the gel plate, adding multiple layers to pull this one pull print. So I hope you enjoy it. Please drop me a comment, let me know what you think. I will be doing the same process for the next 100 days. So I'll be back with videos every 7 to 14 days, really depending on how many layers each print takes. So it's a little sneak peek into my personal creative process and my learning journey as well. So I do hope you enjoy. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos, and you can follow my journey and my progress over the next 100 days. So starting off with some laser image transfer using some illustrations that I've just printed out on my laser printer. I've applied a small amount of paint grain Amsterdam paint there and just smoothing down the laser copy and peeling it back, hoping that image will transfer, and then repeating the process. What I've noticed is you have to put quite a lot of paint down to get a nice kind of defined line, but then the flip side of that is it also leaves a lot of kind of background paint there as well. So it is really kind of a balancing act. Not sure if I like the line quality, don't really like the background, but maybe I can clean that up to include the shape as part of my overall design. I now need to leave this layer to completely dry. So really wasn't keen on the laser transfer, so I thought I would try a different way, an alternative way of creating some line work on my gel plate. So what I'm doing here is I'm making like a biro emboss. So I've got a piece of cartridge paper, 160 GSM, and I've got several sheets of paper underneath me, making an almost cushion, and I'm pressing really hard to try and make an indent on that paper. So just doing a little bit of cleanup to remove the excess paint, using a piece of masking tape. I think I resort to using a baby wipe in the end just to remove more paint. So I'm just rolling out a thin layer of acrylic paint, and then I'm going to lay down my biro emboss and then give it a light rub and then pull it back to reveal the image transfer. Now the idea behind this process is that where the emboss is, it doesn't touch the plate and therefore leaves the paint behind and removes the background. But you can see I must be putting too much pressure on, and that's why it's leaving more of the background paint behind. So what I've done there is I've just used a baby wipe to kind of clean around it, and I'll just embrace that shape as part of my design. So what I'm doing now is I've ripped the shape around the biro emboss to help me out slightly, and I'm just experimenting with applying different pressures to see the best line work I can achieve. And you'll see when I pull back the biro emboss this time, I've removed a lot of the background paint, which is what I wanted, but I've also lost the line work as well. So again, it does take some experimentation to get the right amount of paint and pressure. And you can see I just keep trying and trying. I'll just clean that off and go again until I can find some line work that I'm happy with. Okay, so determined to find a technique that I like to transfer some line work. I thought I'd try this black pastel pencil. I've just drawn that shape onto a piece of copy paper, and I am laying it down on my gel plate, giving it a gentle rub and then pulling it back to reveal that line work. And yes, finally, I've got a result that I'm happy with. I've got no kind of worry about background paint left behind, and I can reuse this. And you can see each time I lay the paper down, it's getting paler. So all I need to do is top up that pastel pencil and the line becomes stronger again. So for my next layer, I want to start adding some collage. So what I've done is I've just traced those shapes onto some old book pages, and I'm just cutting them out ready to collage directly onto the gel plate. So I'm using Liquitex matte medium to adhere the collage to my gel plate. I'm putting a good kind of amount underneath the collage, and then making sure that I am using the matte medium on top of the collage as well. So what I've found with this process is it's really important that your collage papers are stuck down well to the gel plate. If you've got kind of wrinkles and air bubbles and gaps, what happens is, because we're pulling this as a one pull print, they're not adhered to the layer underneath and therefore don't pull off and they rip when we're pulling the final print at the end. So it's really, you really need to make sure you're putting those collage pieces down really well with the matte medium. So I've now cut out the same shapes but in some wet strength tissue paper that I'd previously printed with, and I'm just following the same process. But what I'm doing here is I found this shape really fiddly to cut out, and I thought to myself, you know what, I've got the negative shape as well as the positive shape, and it's took me so long to cut them out. I'm going to use those negative shapes in my design as well. So I'm not just using the positive shape of the leaf, I'm using the negative shape with wet strength tissue paper that's previously been printed on to add to the design. So I'm now using a stencil in a very similar shape but a little bit smaller in scale, and I've just got some turquoise in opaque paint, and I'm just using a sponge to apply that paint through the stencil and then peeling it back to reveal the leaf shape. And I'm just using this method as a way of layering and adding some colour. So what you can see I'm doing there is I'm using the stencil as a stencil and using the sponge to add paint through the stencil, but I'm also then flipping the stencil over, applying it to the gel plate and using it as a stamp. So I'm almost getting two shapes for the price of one. You've got the positive shape of the leaf, but then as you use the stencil as a stamp, you are getting the negative shape. And it's a good way of also using your excess paint and not having to clean your stencils because you're stamping that paint onto the gel plate. I was really happy with the way this layer was building up, so I decided once this was fully dry to mix a slightly darker colour. So I've mixed the turquoise with grey paint to still make like a tealy colour. And again, I'm just following the exact same process, using the stencil as a stencil and sponging the design through the stencil, but then also flipping the stencil over to use it as a stamp. And as long as you make sure the layers are dry underneath, you need to be patient, because when you're overlapping the stencil, if there's any wet paint, it's going to pull it back off. So you do need to let each one dry before moving around the gel plate. I'm using a sponge to apply the acrylic paint through the stencil because I just find it gives me more control, and I can apply a really thin layer of paint. The thinner the layers, the quicker they're going to dry. And then I just find that easier when I'm building up multiple layers. So I have my 16" by 20" gel plate mounted on a piece of Perspex. So I'm just flipping it over to kind of see how my design is progressing. It's extremely busy. There's lots and lots of layers on there, and I just think, right, okay, let's keep going. So I'm now applying layers of parchment in the Liquitex heavy body paint. Don't really like this paint for what I'm doing. It's taking a long time to roll out. It's not going on as smooth. So next time I would substitute that with a softer body acrylic paint. I don't want to apply the paint all over the gel plate. I do want areas of white still popping through, but I'm just going to apply the paint in certain areas, and then I'm going to use a piece of scrunched up tissue paper. Again, I've already printed on this, and I'm just literally pressing it into the gel plate to create like a crinkly texture in my background. And this is really something that you've got to consider when you start, because you're working in reverse. So what I'm doing now is I'm building my background. So where normally when you're creating a gel print, you would maybe start with your background, I started with the kind of line work that I wanted at the forefront of my print. And now as I've progressed and added more and more layers, I'm starting to consider what the background of my print is going to look like. So again, I'm just moving around the plate and adding that kind of background texture in a really light soft colour. And then I need to let this completely dry before adding the next layer, which is matte gel, and again from Liquitex, and this is what I'm going to use to pull the print. So this is clear, and I'm using my brayer to distribute this across the plate. You need quite a substantial amount of the matte gel because it's quite a large plate, so you've got a good area to cover, and you want to make sure it's got a nice even coat that's covering the entire gel plate. I'm laying down some acrylic paper. It's 230 GSM, so it's quite a heavy weight, and it's now time to leave that to dry and keep our fingers crossed. So after a full 24 hours of drying time, it's now time to pull the print. I've flipped it over and I'm pulling the gel plate away from the paper rather than the paper away from the gel plate. And I'm just peeling that back ever so slightly. You know, it's taking quite a lot of strength to pull this gel plate back from the paper. It's really well adhered, and you can see it's coming off quite cleanly. So I'm really happy with the way it's pulling off the gel plate. So do I like this print overall? No, it's far too busy. I've thrown too many techniques at this, but I've learnt so much. So going forward, I'd want to think more about the pastel pencil for line work. I really liked the wet strength tissue paper that I'd previously printed on to collage with, but the book pages didn't work so well. The liquid from the Liquitex medium had kind of blurred the text, and that was just down to the pages that I printed with. So I'd need to spend much more time experimenting with what book pages would work using that collage method. What I have taken from this is that actually as a whole print, no, it doesn't work, but using a small amount, there are some lovely areas that I could perhaps crop down the print to make a series of smaller pieces of artwork. So it was well worth the experimentation, and I've learned so much from these processes and looking forward to taking them further. I hope you've enjoyed watching my experimental process and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think.